On a stormy Texas night, what should have been a routine patrol turned into a nightmare. A helpless animal, its leg mangled, dragged itself toward flashing headlights. But before the officer could act, red laser dots cut through the rain, and gunfire exploded. Why was this tiny cub being hunted? Who wanted it silenced? And why would those in power risk everything to keep the truth buried? As the cop defied orders to protect the fragile life in his arms, he uncovered something darker than he ever imagined. A hidden empire. A betrayal inside the badge. A choice that could cost him his career and his life. And in the end, when fire closed in and escape seemed impossible, he made a decision no one could believe. What would drive a man to risk everything for a broken creature, and what secrets were worth killing to hide? Before we dive in, drop your name or city in the comments. It reminds me that behind every view is a real heartbeat. The rain hammered against Officer Gideon Pike's patrol car as he guided it slowly down the lonely stretch of County Road 23. Lightning flashed across the Texas sky, illuminating the mesquite trees that lined both sides of the road like ghostly sentinels. He'd been an officer in Marrow Creek long enough to know that stormy nights like this usually meant a quiet shift. Most folks had the good sense to stay home. Gideon reached for his coffee cup, taking a careful sip as his headlights cut through the darkness. The radio crackled with routine chatter, mostly weather updates and minor incidents. Nothing that required his attention. That's when he saw it. A small, trembling figure stumbled into his headlights. Gideon's foot instinctively moved to the brake pedal, bringing the patrol car to a gentle stop. His trained eyes widened as he made out the distinctive spotted coat of a leopard cub, its fur matted with rain and mud. The animal limped forward, and Gideon's heart clenched at the sight of crude metal pins jutting from its right hind leg. "What in the world?" he muttered, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I've got an injured exotic animal on County Road 23, about 2 miles east of the Thompson Ranch. Looks like a leopard cub, possibly escaped from somewhere. Going to need animal control." A red dot suddenly appeared on his dashboard. Years of training kicked in. Gideon threw himself down just as the first shot shattered his windshield. Glass rained down as more bullets followed, the sound nearly lost in the storm's fury. The leopard cub let out a terrified cry. Without hesitation, Gideon pushed his door open and rolled out, drawing his service weapon in one fluid motion. The scared cub was still in the road, trying to hobble away from the gunfire. Another shot kicked up asphalt near its injured leg. "Here!" Gideon called out, his voice firm but gentle. The cub's head whipped toward him, golden eyes wide with fear. More red laser sights danced through the rain, searching for targets. Keeping low, Gideon moved forward. His heart pounded, but his hands remained steady on his weapon. The cub seemed to sense his intent, limping toward him as another burst of gunfire erupted from the tree line. "Dispatch, shots fired." He shouted into his shoulder radio. "Multiple shooters, County Road 23. Officer needs assistance." Gideon returned fire, aiming at the muzzle flashes he could see through the rain. The cub reached him, pressing against his leg with a whimper. He could feel it trembling. "I've got you," he murmured, positioning himself between the animal and the gunfire. The cub's trust in him, despite its terror, stirred something deep in his chest. This wasn't just about enforcing the law anymore. This was about protecting an innocent creature from whoever was trying to harm it. More shots came from a different angle. They were trying to flank him. Gideon backed toward his patrol car, one hand keeping the cub close, while the other held his weapon ready. The rain made it hard to see, but he caught glimpses of dark figures moving through the mesquite trees. He fired again, forcing them to take cover. The patrol car's lights still cut through the darkness, creating a small island of visibility in the storm. Gideon knew they were vulnerable here in the open, But he couldn't leave the cub. The radio crackled with responses from other units, but they were minutes away. He'd have to hold out. Another barrage of bullets pinged off his patrol car's hood. The cub pressed closer, its small body shaking violently. As suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. Gideon strained to hear movement over the rain, but the figures had melted back into the mesquite brush like shadows. Only the storm's voice remained, along with the gentle whimpers of the terrified cub beside him. Gideon kept his weapon trained on the tree line, his breath coming in controlled bursts as adrenaline coursed through his system. The whole encounter had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had changed everything. Someone had tried to kill this injured cub, and him along with it. The quiet night he'd expected had just become something far more dangerous. He looked down at the trembling animal pressed against his leg, its crude leg pins a testament to whatever ordeal it had already endured. "Don't worry," he said softly, even as distant sirens began to approach. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, but Gideon couldn't shake the feeling that waiting would be a deadly mistake. He looked down at the leopard cub, its breath coming in shallow pants as blood trickled from around the crude pins in its leg. "Sorry, dispatch," he muttered, switching off his radio. Sometimes doing right means breaking protocol. Gently, he scooped up the trembling cub. It weighed less than he expected, its small body burning with fever. The animal didn't resist, instead pressing closer to his chest as he carefully placed it in the passenger seat of his patrol car. Gideon knew exactly where to go. Dr. Anya Castro ran a small wildlife veterinary practice on the outskirts of town. He'd worked with her before on cases involving injured animals, and more importantly, he trusted her judgment. She was one of the few people in Marrow Creek who seemed to care more about doing right than following rules. The drive took 12 tense minutes. Every bump in the road drew a whimper from the cub, making Gideon wince. Rain still hammered against the windshield as he pulled up to the modest clinic, its porch light a beacon in the darkness. He pressed the after-hours buzzer repeatedly until a light flicked on inside. Dr. Castro appeared at the door, her dark hair messily tied back, wearing scrubs and practical boots. "Officer Pike? What's the emergency?" Her eyes widened as she saw the cub in his arms. "Bring it inside, quickly." The examination room smelled of antiseptic and clean metal. Gideon laid the cub on the steel table while Anya pulled on gloves and grabbed her instruments. "Someone tried to kill it," Gideon explained, recounting the ambush. "Those pins in its leg look amateur." Anya's face hardened as she examined the injury. "These aren't medical grade. Someone did this without proper equipment or training." She administered pain medication and began cleaning the wound. "The infection's bad, but we caught it in time." The cub remained surprisingly calm under her careful touch. As she worked, Anya ran a microchip scanner over its shoulder. The device beeped. "Got it," she said, then frowned at the display. "That's strange. What is it?" "According to this chip, this cub is supposed to be in state custody as evidence in an ongoing investigation." She looked up at Gideon, but that's not the strangest part. "Take a look at this." She turned her computer monitor toward him. The transfer document showed the cub being moved from state care to a private facility. But what caught Gideon's attention was the authorizing signature at the bottom. "Chief Trask." He leaned closer, his stomach tightening. "That doesn't make sense. Local police don't have authority to transfer state evidence." "Exactly." Anya's voice was grim. "And look at the facility it was supposedly transferred to, Safari Oaks Reserve. I used to work there until I couldn't stomach their practices anymore." Gideon straightened up, his mind racing. Chief Norma Trask had always seemed beyond reproach, a model of proper procedure and protocol. But this document, combined with the professional hit attempt he'd just survived, painted a very different picture. "Someone's going to notice I went off radio," he said quietly. "And when they find out, I brought the cub here instead of waiting for animal control. They'll try to take it." Anya's hand rested protectively on the sleeping cub's head. "After what you saw tonight, do you think they'll let it live?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the clinic, Gideon felt the calm clarity of a decision point. He'd sworn an oath to uphold the law, but what happened when those in charge of the law were the ones breaking it? "We need to document everything," he said finally. "The injury, the chip data, the transfer document. Whatever's going on here goes deeper than just one exotic animal." Anya nodded, already reaching for her camera. "I'll help you, but you understand what this means. Going against Chief Trask. I know." Gideon watched the gentle rise and fall of the cub's chest as it slept, finally safe for the moment. But some things are worth the risk. The front door of the clinic burst open with a bang that made both Gideon and Anya jump. Heavy boots thundered across the waiting room floor. Before either could react, Porter Holly swept in like a storm front, flanked by two men whose bulging jackets poorly concealed their weapons. His silver hair caught the fluorescent lights as he surveyed the examination room with cold authority. "Well, wow. What do we have here?" Hale's smile didn't reach his eyes. He wore custom leather boots that probably cost more than Gideon's monthly salary and a ranch jacket that spoke of wealth and influence. "This is a private medical facility," Anya said, stepping between Holly and the examination table where the sedated cub lay. "You can't just barge in here." "Actually, I can." Holly nodded to one of his men, who produced a thick envelope. "Court order. That animal is the legal property of the Safari Oaks Wildlife Rescue Foundation. We've been looking for our missing cat all evening." Gideon took the documents, noting how Anya's face had gone pale at the mention of Safari Oaks. The paperwork looked official, complete with stamps and signatures, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. "Funny timing," Gideon said, keeping his voice level. "This cub was just shot at less than an hour ago. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mr. Holly? Are you accusing me of something, Officer Pike?" Hale's voice carried a dangerous edge. "I'm simply here to retrieve Foundation property. That cub is part of our endangered species breeding program." "You mean your exotic pet factory?" Anya spat the words. Her hands were trembling, but her voice stayed strong. "I saw what really happens at Safari Oaks. Those cubs aren't bred for conservation. They're status symbols for your wealthy donors." Hale's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment. "Dr. Kestrel, still bitter about your departure from our organization, I see. I left because you ordered me to declaw healthy cubs," Anya shot back. "To mutilate them just so your rich friends could play with them at parties without getting scratched." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. Gideon watched Hale's face carefully, seeing the calculated shifts in his expression. "Those were unfortunate but necessary medical procedures," Holly said smoothly. "But that's ancient history. Right now, I have legal documentation proving my foundation's ownership of that animal. Hand it over, or things will become very unpleasant." One of Hale's men shifted his jacket, deliberately revealing the gun holstered underneath. Gideon kept his own hand near his service weapon. "This cub is evidence in an active investigation," Gideon stated firmly. "It's not going anywhere until we sort out these irregularities in the paperwork." Hale's smile turned razor sharp. "Officer Pike, surely you understand the position you're in. A patrol officer, going against official documents, harboring private property." He leaned closer, dropping his voice. "It would be a shame if this misunderstanding affected your career, or Dr. Kestrel's license to practice. Are you threatening us?" Gideon asked quietly. "Threatening? No. Hale spread his hands in a gesture of mock innocence. Just having a friendly conversation about consequences. I'll give you 24 hours to reconsider your position. After that, he shrugged. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. He turned to leave, his men falling in step behind him. At the door, he paused. Oh, and Dr. Kestrel? To be careful driving home tonight. These roads can be so dangerous in the rain. The door clicked shut behind them with quiet finality. Anya sagged against the examination table, her face drawn. He'll do it, you know, she whispered. Whatever. He's planning. I've seen what happens to people who cross Porter Holly. Gideon moved to check the windows, making sure Hale and his men were really leaving. Tell me everything you know about Safari Oaks. What else happened there? It's worse than just the declawing. Anya stroked the sleeping cub's head. The breeding program is a front. Cubs disappear all the time, sold to private collectors. But no one can prove anything because Hale has half the county in his pocket. Wow, Gideon said, watching Hale's expensive SUV pull away into the rainy night. He doesn't have us in his pocket, and that's going to be his mistake. The morning. Sun had barely touched the horizon when Gideon made the call. He sat in his patrol car, parked behind Anya's clinic, watching steam rise from his coffee cup as the phone rang. Agent Brenna Cates speaking. The voice was crisp, professional. Agent Cates, this is Officer Gideon Pike from Marrow Creek PD. We have a situation involving illegal wildlife trafficking that falls under your jurisdiction. There was a pause on the line. Go on. For the next 10 minutes, Gideon laid out everything. The injured cub, the falsified paperwork, Anya's testimony about Safari Oaks. He could hear Agent Cates typing as he spoke. Send me photos of that microchip data, she said when he finished, and the court documents Hale presented. I've had Safari Oaks on my radar for months, but we haven't been able to get solid evidence. I'll have Dr. Kestrel forward everything right away. Gideon glanced at his watch. How do you want to proceed? Carefully, Agent Cates replied. If Hale has as much local influence as you say, we need to build an airtight case before moving. Can you meet me in person? Somewhere off the radar? They arranged to meet at a truck stop 30 miles outside of town. Gideon hung up and went inside the clinic, where Anya was checking on the cub. How's our patient? He asked. Better. Anya smiled tiredly. The antibiotics are working, and the surgical site looks clean. No signs of infection. She straightened up, rubbing her lower back. Did you reach the federal agent? Yes. We're meeting her in 2 hours. I want you to come with us. Your testimony about what you saw at Safari Oaks could be crucial. Anya nodded, but her eyes were worried. Hale will know if I'm seen talking to federal agents. He has people everywhere. That's why we're meeting. While outside town, Gideon touched her shoulder gently. We'll be careful, but this might be our only chance to stop him. The truck stop was nearly empty when they arrived. Agent Cates was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop and a cup of coffee. She was younger than Gideon had expected, but her sharp eyes missed nothing as they approached. Dr. Kestrel, she said, standing to shake Anya's hand. I've reviewed your veterinary credentials. Very impressive. Please, sit down. They spent the next hour going over everything in detail. Anya described the breeding operation at Safari Oaks, the hidden barns where cubs were kept out of sight, the mysterious nighttime shipments, the pressure to falsify health certificates. The problem, Agent Cates said, tapping her pen against her notepad, is that all of this is circumstantial. We need hard evidence. Photos, documents, witness statements from current employees. The breeding barn, Gideon said. That's where we'll find everything we need. Anya, you said it's separate from the main compound. Yes, about half a mile into the back property. They keep it off the tourist routes. Anya sketched a rough map on a napkin. There's a service road that leads right to it, but It's guarded. Agent Cates studied the map. We need someone on the inside. Someone who can document what's happening without raising suspicion. I might know someone, Anya said slowly. One of the night shift handlers. She was uncomfortable with how the cubs were being treated, but she needed the job. If we approach her carefully, no. Agent Cates shook her head. Too risky. If Hawley suspects anything, he'll destroy evidence and move the operation before we can act. We need surveillance first. Photos, video, movement patterns. I can do that, Gideon offered. I know the back roads. I can set up observation points, track their routines. Agent Cates considered him for a long moment. You understand what you're risking? If Hawley discovers you're investigating him, my badge was already on the line the moment I didn't hand over that cub, Gideon said quietly. At least this way, we might actually stop him. The agent nodded. All right, but we do this by the book. I'll get you proper surveillance equipment, cameras with night vision, long-range lenses. We need everything documented perfectly for court. They spend another half hour working out the details, communication protocols, dead drops for sharing, information, emergency procedures if anyone was compromised. When they finally stood to leave, Agent Cates held Gideon back for a moment. One more thing, she said quietly. Watch your back. Hale's not just wealthy, he's connected. The kind of connected that makes problems disappear. I understand. No, I don't think you do. Her eyes were intense. 3 years ago, I had another case building against him in Louisiana. My key witness vanished 2 days before he was supposed to testify. They never found him. The warning hung heavy in the air. Gideon glanced at Anya, who was waiting by their car. We'll be careful, he promised. But we're not backing down. Agent Cates managed a small smile. Good, because if we can pull this off, we might finally bring down one of the biggest wildlife trafficking operations in the state. Just remember, document everything. Trust no one outside this group, and if anything feels wrong, pull out immediately. They left the truck stop separately, taking different routes back to town. In his rearview mirror, Gideon watched Agent Cates's government sedan disappear around a bend. For the first time since finding the injured cub, he felt like they had a real chance of fighting back. The summons came early the next morning. Gideon's heart sank as he walked into the station, immediately noticing the tense atmosphere. Officers avoided his gaze, suddenly finding their paperwork fascinating. Chief Norma Trask sat behind her desk, her face a mask of stern authority. Officer Pike, close the door. Gideon did as instructed, standing at attention. The morning sun, through the Venetian blinds, cast prism bar shadows across the office. Your actions with the exotic animal situation have been completely unacceptable, Trask said, her voice clipped and cold. You directly disobeyed orders to wait for animal control. You interfered with a legitimate wildlife sanctuary's property rights. And now I hear you've been making unfounded accusations about documentation irregularities. Chief, that cub was... Silence. Trask's hand slammed onto her desk. I'm not interested in your explanations. Your behavior shows a pattern of insubordination that cannot be tolerated in this department. She stood up, pulling a document from her desk drawer. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending review. Badge and service weapon on the desk. Gideon felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Chief, please. That cub needs protection. Hale's operation is none of your concern anymore. Trask's eyes were steel. Badge, now. With slow, deliberate movements, Gideon unclipped his badge. The weight of it in his hand felt wrong, like letting go of a lifeline. He placed it on the desk, followed by his service weapon. Animal control. We'll handle the exotic animal situation appropriately, Trask continued. You are to have no further contact with this case. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, Chief." Gideon's voice was quiet but steady. Dismissed. The walk out of the station felt endless. Officers who had worked beside him for years suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. Only Ramon Klein, his friend of 5 years, met his eyes with what looked like sympathy. "Hey," Ramon called out, following him to the parking lot. "This is rough, man. Listen, maybe I can help." Gideon turned, hope flickering despite everything. "How?" "I know some people who could arrange a safe transfer for the cub," Ramon said quietly. "Off the books. Somewhere Hale can't touch it." "Meet Emmy tonight at the old grain storage facility on Route 12. 10 o'clock. "Why there?" "Neutral ground. My contacts are careful people." Ramon glanced around. "Trust me, Gideon. I want to help make this right." The day crawled by in a haze of worry and planning. Gideon called Anya, warning her to be extra vigilant at the clinic. Without his badge, he felt exposed, vulnerable. But if Ramon's contacts could really help get the cub to safety, the grain storage facility loomed dark against the night sky when Gideon pulled up. The air was thick with the smell of rain and rust. Ramon's patrol car sat empty near the main entrance. "Ramon?" Gideon called out, walking carefully between the towering silos. His flashlight beam caught movement ahead. "In here!" Ramon's voice echoed from inside one of the storage bays. Gideon stepped through the door and froze. Laser sights danced across his chest. Dark figures emerged from behind rusted equipment. And there stood Ramon, his face a mask of guilt, standing next to one of Hale's security men. "I'm sorry," Ramon whispered. "They have leverage on me. I didn't have a choice." The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow. Gideon's mind raced, cataloging exits, angles, possibilities. But without his weapon, without backup, "Mr. Hale sends his regards," the security man said, stepping forward. "And a message about the consequences of interference." Gideon tensed, ready to fight despite the odds. But in that moment, he understood. With perfect clarity, his badge, once his shield and symbol of protection, had become the very thing that made him vulnerable. They had used his trust in the system and his fellow officers to strip away his defenses. The security man smiled, cold and professional. "Now then, Officer Pike, let's have a discussion about staying in your lane." The laser sight steadied on his chest, and Gideon knew the night was about to get much longer. The rain began to fall outside, drowning out any hope of someone hearing. What was about to happen in this lonely place thought Ramon wouldn't meet his eyes anymore, backing away toward the door. The ultimate betrayal from someone Gideon had trusted with his life countless times before. The security man took another step forward, and the trap closed completely around him. The first shot cracked through the night like thunder. Gideon instinctively dropped to the ground as bullets peppered the metal siding behind him. Harbor, his loyal K-9 partner, who had followed him despite being off duty, let out a sharp yelp as a round grazed his shoulder. "Harbor, down," Gideon commanded, crawling toward his wounded companion. The German shepherd's fur was matted with blood, but the wound looked superficial. Still, seeing his partner hurt made Gideon's blood boil. Through the chaos, he heard the distinctive rumble of a heavy engine. Headlights blazed to life, illuminating the feed depot's loading area. A pickup truck reversed at high speed toward the metal crate where they temporarily secured the Leopard Cub. "No." Anya's voice cut through the darkness. She had emerged from her hiding spot behind some old equipment, running toward the crate. The truck's rear bumper slammed into the metal container, sending it skidding across the concrete. The cub's frightened cries echoed off the walls. Gideon's heart pounded as he watched Anya dodge another burst of gunfire. She reached the damaged crate, her fingers working frantically at the latch. The truck's engine revved again, preparing for another strike. "Cover me," Gideon shouted to Harbor, who, despite his injury, took up a defensive position. The dog's training kicked in as he began barking fiercely, disorienting their attackers. Gideon sprinted through the rain of bullets, sliding the last few feet to reach Anya. Together, they wrenched open the bent door of the crate. The leopard cub cowered inside, trembling but alive. Its previously treated leg was bleeding again from the impact. "We have to move." Gideon wrapped his arms around the cub, while Anya provided what cover she could with a piece of the broken crate. The truck's tires squealed as it came for another pass. Harbor's barking suddenly turned aggressive. Through the chaos, Gideon glimpsed the dog launching himself at one of the gunmen, taking him down. The man's weapon clattered across the concrete. "This way." Anya pointed toward a narrow gap between the storage units. It would be too tight for the truck to follow. They ran, the cub trembling against Gideon's chest, its claws digging into his jacket. More shots rang out. Pieces of concrete exploded near their feet. Harbor appeared beside them, limping but keeping pace. The loyal dog's presence gave Gideon a surge of determination that they emerged on the other side of the depot, where Anya's veterinary van waited. The sound of pursuing footsteps echoed behind them. Gideon could hear Ramong's voice among them, shouting orders, and the betrayal cut deep all over again. "Get in." Anya yanked open the van's side door. Gideon carefully placed the cub inside, then whistled for Harbor. The dog jumped in despite his injury, positioning himself protectively near the frightened cub. Anya threw herself into the driver's seat while Gideon barely got the passenger door closed before she stomped on the accelerator. The van's tires spun in the loose gravel, then caught hold. They shot forward into the darkness, leaving the depot and its dangers behind. "Harbor's hurt," Gideon said, twisting in his seat to check on both animals. The cub had huddled against the dog, finding comfort in Harbor's steady presence, despite being natural enemies. The sight would have been heartwarming if not for their dire circumstances. "I've got supplies in back," Anya replied, her knuckles wide on the steering wheel. "We'll treat him as soon as we're safe." She took a sharp turn onto a back road, her years of driving to emergency veterinary calls evident in her skilled handling. Gideon's mind raced through their options, all of them bleak. The department he'd served faithfully for years had turned against him. His fellow officers, people he'd trusted with his life, had tried to kill him. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, deeper than any bullet could have caused. "They'll be looking for both our vehicles now," he said grimly. "We need to switch cars, get somewhere they won't think to look." Anya nodded, her face set with determination. "I know a place. An old client's farm, about 20 miles outside town. There, good people who don't ask questions." In the back of the van, Harbor whimpered softly as they hit a bump. The leopard cub pressed closer to him, both animals finding solace in their shared vulnerability. Their unlikely alliance mirrored Gideon and Anya's own situation. Former officers of different systems, now united in their fight against corruption. As they drove through the night, Gideon realized they had crossed a point of no return. Their trust in the system was irreparably shattered. From now on, they could rely only on themselves, their wits, and each other. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders, but looking at the wounded animals in their care, he knew they had made the right choice. The headlights cut through the darkness ahead, illuminating an uncertain path. But they were alive, they had the cub, and they had each other. For now, that would have to be enough. After an hour of tense driving through back roads, Anya pulled her van into the shelter of an old barn. The weathered structure sat far back from the main road, hidden by a grove of mesquite trees. The elderly couple who owned the property were away visiting family, perfect timing for those needing to lay low. Inside the barn's musty interior, Anya worked quickly to treat Harbor's wound. The graze wasn't deep, but the loyal dog sat perfectly still as she cleaned and bandaged it. The leopard cub watched from a makeshift nest of hay, still refusing to leave Harbor's side. "Good boy," Anya murmured, giving Harbor a gentle scratch behind his ears. "You're as brave as your partner." Gideon paced the length of the barn, his boots scuffing against the dirt floor. The events at the feed depot played over and over in his mind. The ambush, Rahman's betrayal, the desperate escape. His world had turned upside down in a matter of days. "Gideon," Anya called softly, breaking through his dark thoughts. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I remembered while we were driving." He turned to face her. The barn's single lantern cast shadows across her features, but couldn't hide the intensity in her eyes. "When I worked at Safari Oaks, I handled all the medical records, including the sedation protocols." She pulled a small notebook from her pocket, hands trembling slightly. "I memorized the lot numbers of every shipment that came through. Force of habit. You never know when inventory discrepancies might matter." Gideon moved closer, sensing the weight of what she was about to share. "And? The 4 kit we found on the Cub?" Anya opened her notebook, pointing to a series of numbers. She'd written down, "The lot number matches exactly with what Holly was using at Safari Oaks. But here's the thing. Those drugs were supposed to be exclusively allocated to state evidence lockup. No private facility should have had access to them." The implications hit Gideon like a physical blow. "You're saying the sedatives came from police evidence storage?" Anya nodded grimly. "The same batch numbers. There's no mistake. And with Chief Trask's signature on those transfer papers." She let the sentence hang. "It wasn't just covering up evidence theft," Gideon said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "She was actively laundering the evidence through official channels, making illegal shipments look legitimate. The corruption goes deeper than we thought," Anya confirmed. "This isn't just about one dirty chief or one wealthy rancher. They've created an entire system to move controlled substances and protected animals through official channels." Gideon ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. "That's why they came at us so hard. We didn't just stumble onto one illegal cub. We found proof of their whole operation." Harbor lifted his head at the tension in Gideon's voice, while the leopard cub pressed closer to the dog's side. The unlikely pair's bond seemed to strengthen with each passing hour. "The lot numbers are irrefutable," Anya continued, her voice gaining strength. "They prove direct links between Hale's operation and state evidence handling. Every number, every date. I recorded it all." She tapped her notebook. "Old habits die hard, I guess." "Those habits might save us," Gideon said. He settled onto a hay bale, weighing their options. "This is bigger than internal affairs now. With proof of evidence tampering at this level, it explains how Hale's been operating so openly," Anya added. "He wasn't just bribing officials to look the other way. He had the chief of police helping him create paper trails that would stand up to scrutiny." The full scope of the corruption made Gideon's stomach turn. How many other officers were involved? How many animals had suffered? How long had this been going on? "We need to get this information to Agent Cates," he said finally. "But after that ambush, we can't trust any official channels. They'll be watching everything." Anya closed her notebook, tucking it securely away. "We'll find a way. We have to. That cub isn't the only one counting on us now." The weight of responsibility settled heavily between them. What had started as one rescue had unveiled a web of corruption that threatened the very foundations of law enforcement in Marrow Creek. But as Gideon watched Harbor and the cub huddled together in their corner of the barn, he knew they couldn't back down. Sometimes the right path was the hardest one, but it was still the only path worth taking. The old pickup truck bounced along the back roads, its headlights off to avoid detection. Inside, Gideon gripped the steering wheel while Anya kept watch for any signs of pursuit. They'd arranged to meet Agent Cates at an abandoned cotton gin 20 miles outside of Marrow Creek. The moon cast long shadows across the weathered building as they pulled up. Harbor's ears perked forward from the back seat, alert but calm. That was a good sign. The dog's instincts had already saved them once tonight. Agent Cates emerged from the shadows, her dark jacket helping her blend with the night. She carried a heavy-looking briefcase and wore an expression that meant business. "You made it," she said, scanning the surroundings before approaching. "Let's talk inside." "We don't have much time." The interior of the gin smelled of old cotton and rust. Kate spread several documents across a dusty workbench, switching on a battery-powered lantern. "Here's what we know about Hale's donor night," she began, pointing to a printed invitation. "Every year, he hosts his biggest supporters at Safari Oaks. They tour the facility, watch staged animal presentations, and write big checks to his foundation." "I remember these events," Anya said, leaning in to study the papers. "They always moved certain animals out of sight beforehand, the ones showing signs of abuse or those being prepped for transport." Gideon nodded. "And this year's event?" 3 nights from now," Cates replied, "which gives us just enough time to set our trap. According to my sources, Hale's planning a major transport immediately after the donors leave, moving at least a dozen cubs through his underground pipeline." "He's getting bold," Anya observed. "Usually he spaces out the shipments." "He's feeling pressure," Cates explained. "Our investigation has been tightening the noose, even if he doesn't know exactly how much we have. He's rushing to move inventory while he still can." Gideon studied the layout plans of Safari Oaks that Cates had brought. "What's our play?" 3-phase operation, Cates said, her finger tracing routes on the map. "First, we need eyes inside. During the donor event. Anya, you still have contacts among the staff?" "A few who might help. They're not all corrupt. Some just need the jobs." "Good. We need them to plant these." Cates opened her briefcase, revealing several tiny cameras. "We'll document everything. The staged presentations, the donor interactions, any evidence of drugs or restraints being used." "Phase 2? Gideon asked. "That's where you come in. While the donors are being wined and dined in the main compound, you'll lead a small team to document the real operation. The breeding barn, the medical supplies, everything Holly keeps hidden from public view." Anya's expression darkened. "I can draw you a map of where to look. The worst areas are underground, beneath the hay storage." "And phase 3? Gideon pressed. "The transport intercept." Kate's voice held steel. "Once the donors clear out, Hale's people will start moving animals. We'll have teams in place to track and stop every vehicle. With the documentation from phases 1 and 2, plus the transport intercept, we'll have an airtight case." Harbor patted over to Gideon, pressing against his leg. The dog seemed to sense the gravity of what they were planning. "What about Chief Trask?" Anya asked. "She have officers watching the roads." "Already handled," Cates assured them. "I've coordinated with state police. They'll control all access points, using officers from outside the county. Local law enforcement won't be notified until it's too late to interfere." Gideon felt the first stirrings of hope since this all began. "You've thought this through?" "Had to," Cates replied. "We get one shot at this. If we miss anything, Hale's lawyers will tear the case apart." She began sorting the documents into folders. "I have a safe house ready. You'll need to lay low until the operation begins." "The cub?" Anya asked. "Secure veterinary facility in Austin," Kate said. "I've arranged transport tonight. Armed guards, full documentation. No one will touch it there." They spent the next hour reviewing details, timing, communications, contingency plans. Cates had backup teams ready, evidence handlers standing by, even media contacts prepared to break the story once it was done. This isn't just about Holly anymore, she told them as they prepared to leave. We're taking down everyone involved. The corrupt officers, the suppliers, the whole network. You two broke this case open. Now we're gonna finish it. As they loaded back into the truck, Gideon felt the weight of what lay ahead. In 3 days, they would either expose years of corruption and abuse or lose everything trying. He glanced, and Anya saw the same determination in her eyes that he felt in his heart. "We're doing the right thing," she said softly, reading his thoughts. "I know." He started the engine. Just wish doing right didn't feel so much like walking into fire. Harbor woofed softly from the back seat, as if offering his own encouragement. They pulled away from the cotton gin, leaving Agent Cates to make her own exit later. The pieces were in place. The plan was set. In 3 days, they would bring the fight directly to Porter Hale's doorstep. The night wrapped around them as they drove, stars wheeling overhead. They had chosen their path, and now there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, but for the first time since that stormy night when a wounded cub stumbled into his headlights, Gideon felt like they had a real chance to win. The evening at Safari Oaks began smoothly, too smoothly. Gideon watched from the tree line as luxury cars rolled up the winding drive, delivering Hale's wealthy donors to his carefully orchestrated show. Through his earpiece, he heard Anya's calm voice coordinating with their inside contacts. "Cameras are in place," she whispered. "Main hall, presentation area, and donor lounge all covered." "Copy that," Agent Cates responded. "Phase 1 proceeding. Gideon, you're clear to move." He signaled to his small team, to fish and wildlife agents in dark tactical gear. They moved silently through the shadows toward the breeding barn, using the donor event's noises cover. Harbor padded beside them, alert for any security patrols. The barn's security keypad yielded to the code Anya had provided. Inside, the truth of Hal's operation lay exposed rows of small cages, medical equipment, detailed breeding records. The agents moved quickly, photographing everything while Gideon collected samples of the sedatives and other drugs. "Multiple violations confirmed," one agent reported quietly. "Unauthorized breeding, illegal sedation protocols, falsified transportation records." A distant explosion shattered their progress. Harbor's ears pricked up seconds before alarms began blaring across the compound. Through the barn's high windows, Gideon saw an orange glow reflecting off the clouds. "We've got fire." Anya's voice crackled with static. "Hale's men are setting controlled burns around the perimeter. They're destroying everything." Gideon's blood ran cold. "Where are you?" "Medical building, east side." The Cub. Her transmission cut off in a burst of static. "All units, implement." "Emergency evacuation," Cates ordered. "Fire department has been blocked by accident on access road. We're on our own." The agents grabbed their evidence and rushed for the exit, but intense heat already radiated through the barn's metal walls. Outside, strategic fire lines were burning, creating a barrier between the compound and potential escape routes. The smoke was thick, disorienting. "Anya, report," Gideon called into his radio. Only static answered. A secondary explosion rocked the ground propane tanks near the hay storage, detonating. The blast wave knocked them off their feet. Harbor barked urgently, pulling at Gideon's sleeve. "Go," he told the agents. "Get that evidence out. I'm finding Anya." He followed Harbor through the thickening smoke, trusting the dog's nose and instincts. The medical building loomed ahead, partially obscured by flame and smoke. A figure appeared in the haze. Porter Hale himself, flanked by armed men. "Quite a show, isn't it, Officer Pike?" Hale's voice carried over the roar of the flames. "Though, I suppose you're not an officer anymore. Shame how evidence can just go up in smoke." "You're burning your own animals alive," Gideon snarled. "Acceptable losses. Insurance will cover it." "And there's no proof of anything else, is there?" Holly smiled coldly. "I'd focus on getting out while you can. That building behind you won't last much longer." As if to emphasize his point, another explosion sent burning debris raining down. Holly and his men disappeared into the smoke as Gideon ducked into the medical building. "Anya," he called out, Harbor leading him through the smoky corridors. He found her in a back room, trying to free the cub from its recovery kennel. The metal latch had warped from the heat. "The release is jammed," she coughed, struggling with the mechanism. Together, they worked at the latch while flames began creeping under the door. The cub was panicking, and Gideon could feel the heat intensifying. Finally, the latch gave way, with a screech of metal. But as Anya reached for the cub, part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking their primary exit. Smoke poured in through the gaps. The cub scrambled back into its kennel, terrified. "The window," Gideon gasped, but thick security bars covered it. They were trapped, with fire closing in on all sides. Harbor barked frantically, pawing at the floor near a metal grate. Gideon dropped to his knees, recognizing it as a drainage access point. "Help me," he called to Anya. Together they pulled at the grate while flames licked at the doorframe. The metal was hot enough to burn their hands, but desperation gave them strength. With a grinding sound, the grate finally came free. The drainage tunnel below was narrow, but it was their only chance. The real challenge would be getting the frightened cub to follow them. Anya reached into the kennel, speaking softly to the trembling animal despite the chaos around them. "Trust me, little one," she pleaded. "Please trust me." The ceiling groaned, ominously above them. Through the smoke, Gideon could see the support beams beginning to buckle. They were out of time. The building was about to come down around them, and they were still trapped inside with a terrified wild animal and no clear path to safety. The heat was becoming unbearable. Gideon looked at Anya's soot-streaked face, at the terrified cub, and made his choice. He yanked his badge from his chest and threw it aside. "To hell with protocol," he growled. "We're doing this my way." He sprinted through the burning building, Harbor at his heels, and jumped into his patrol cruiser. The engine roared to life. Gideon reversed, then slammed the accelerator. The cruiser crashed through the barn's wooden doors in an explosion of splinters, and metal dot smoke billowed out as he leaped from the vehicle. Other animals were still caged, inside exotic cats, cubs, even a bear. He wouldn't let them burn. "Anya!" he shouted through his radio. "Get to the drainage tunnel exit. I've made us a way out." Together, they worked frantically. Gideon dragged cages toward the opening while Anya guided the animals. Harbor helped herd the frightened creatures away from the flames. The Leopard Cub, finally trusting Anya, followed close to her legs. Sirens wailed in the distance. Agent Cates had gotten through. Fire trucks and federal vehicles converged on the property, cutting off escape routes. Hale's men scattered, but Gideon spotted Holly himself trying to slip away in the chaos. "Not this time," he muttered. With Harbor providing backup, Gideon tackled Holly to the ground. The rancher fought dirty, landing a punch that split Gideon's lip, but Gideon held firm. "Porter Holly," Agent Cates announced, striding through the smoke with her badge raised. "You're under arrest for wildlife trafficking, evidence tampering, attempted murder, and conspiracy." Chief Trask arrived, likely hoping to control the situation, but federal agents immediately took her into custody. Her face went pale as they read her rights. "Chief Norma Trask," Cates continued, "you're under arrest for conspiracy and obstruction of justice." Raman Klein emerged from the chaos, hands raised. "I want to make a deal," he called out. "I'll testify about everything." The fire department contained the blaze before it could destroy all the evidence. Inside the barn, agents discovered detailed records of illegal breeding, sales ledgers, and proof of Trask's involvement in laundering documentary evidence dot as dawn broke over the smoking ruins. Gideon sat on the bumper of an ambulance while a paramedic treated his burns. Anya approached, the leopard cub still faithfully by her side. She sat next to him, taking his hand. "They found homes for all the rescued animals," she said softly. "Legitimate sanctuaries this time. And our little friend here? She's going to a rehabilitation center in Colorado." Gideon nodded, watching the cub that had started it all. "She deserves a good life." "They all do." Agent Cates joined them, holding out a fresh badge. "The department wants to reinstate you, Pike. Clean slate. Promotion included." Gideon looked at the badge, then at Anya and the cub. He shook his head. "I appreciate it, but I'm done wearing a uniform. Some lines shouldn't be crossed, even with a badge." "I had a feeling you'd say that." Kate smiled. "How about working with my team instead? We need civilian investigators who understand both sides of the law. Someone who'll put justice before protocol." "Protocol. Now that," Gideon said, "sounds like something I could do." Anya squeezed his hand. "We could do it together." "The center in Colorado? They offered me a position as their head veterinarian. They'd welcome a federal investigator on staff." Gideon turned to her, seeing his future in her eyes. "You'd want that?" "U.S. I want exactly that," she replied. "U.S. Harbor woofed in agreement, tail wagging. The leopard cub purred, rubbing against their legs dot in the distance. Federal agents led Hawley and Trask to waiting vehicles. The sun rose higher, burning away the smoke, revealing a morning of justice served and lives transformed. Not by a badge or authority, but by the simple choice to do what was right, no matter the cost. If you believe stories can heal, lift, and connect us, this channel is for you. Thanks for being here. Hit subscribe, and I'll meet you again tomorrow with something real.